In front of me, I have my two nearly identical Mustangs. The main difference from factory being that the one on the left was a performance package and the one on the right is a convertible. But all in all, they both have manual transmissions, they both have red interior, they both even have white paint on the outside, although you can't tell it on this car because it's been wrapped. So in today's video, we're going to dive in and actually find out whether it's worth it to modify your car. If you're looking for the quick answer is not really. A lot of people would say it depends, but that's not a satisfactory answer. Here's the thing is whenever you make a decision on a modification on a car, you're actually deciding whether you want the car to be more oriented to one specific thing or not. In other words, this car right here is more oriented towards the track, so it's not as great on the street. And then that car over there is more oriented towards the street and not as great on the track. But it's amazing to go out on weekends, have a nice drive by the beach, have the top down, all of those things. So what we're gonna do is actually put both of these cars against each other. We're gonna go over a lot of the mods, not all of the mods. If you guys are interested in that, I have a video where I go over all $25,000 worth of mods on this car. You guys can go check that out. But in this video, we're gonna go over the main ones that make the difference between driving a modified Mustang versus driving a completely stock Mustang. All right, in this car, we have a full bolt-on setup. As you know, if you've been watching the channel, we have headers, a full exhaust system, this intake right here, we have injectors, we have a tune, we have all the main full bolt-on mods. And in this car, again, completely stock. So if we're looking at power numbers, I have not dynoed this car, but I've seen people with similar setups get close to the 500 horsepower range. And then this is just gonna be the factory number. I think it's around 450 horsepower. So if we're gonna ask the question, should you modify your engine to get more power? This one I would go with yes, only because you can modify these engines and have a full bolt-on setup that has decent amount of horsepower and still be able to drive it on the street. This car can feel a little bit sluggish in comparison to this car, although this car is going to be much more sportier than your average car, especially your average Mustang that might be an EcoBoost. So as far as engine mods, that I would say is a good thing to modify. You get a lot of it for the track and a lot of it for the street as well. Although now that I'm looking here, I would not do this if you have a street car. The only reason why I opened up the hood like this is because on the track, a lot of times we can get a lot of hood bulge. Basically what happens is air comes in through the front right here and doesn't have a place to escape. So our answer for that was to add that hood vent right there. Now, if you have a car that you're going to be using on the street, I wouldn't do something like this. But if you have a car that you're going to be driving on the track, I would do this right here. Now, as far as body kits and other pieces like that, I would not recommend doing those. The ones from the factory are really high quality and they look great. Now, if you want just the aesthetic, then sure, you can go ahead and get it. Now, you need to know that this doesn't raise the value of the car. So when it becomes time to sell this car, you're gonna be losing out on all that money. It's just gonna go down the drain because all these modifications don't add to the value of the car. These two cars go for the same price whenever you're trying to sell it, except for this one has $25,000 worth of modifications. So from a financial standpoint, it does not make sense to modify your car, and it is better to just leave it stock because at the end of the day, you're going to have best performance and usability day to day on a stock car. As far as splitters, I would say that splitters are worth it. I think they add a lot of aesthetic to the car. And if you're okay with losing the money when it's time to sell it, the splitters add a lot of aesthetic, but it needs to be a legitimate splitter. Because if you get one of those self-tapping screw splitters, they're really not doing anything. So you're not gonna get any performance gains out of it. And they just look all right. So you can get the same looks with actual performance if you get a legitimate splitter. Moving on to wheels and suspension, obviously this car looks really, really tall. So in the past, I have lowered cars. If you're just doing springs, that would probably be the thing that I recommend the most because they're cheap. It's only $100. Now, there is one main drawback. Whenever I'm driving the gray car out of the driveway, I'm always scraping right here on the edge and I have to take it at an angle because this driveway is far too steep. So if you have a driveway that is too steep, you're not gonna wanna have to deal with that day to day unless it's a track car. You're really going to want to have that clearance. So on this car, we have the stock ride height and we don't even bother to check. We can just go right over that. We know that we can clear it every single time, whereas this car scratches every single time and it's really painful. So as far as lowered suspension, I would say a moderate spring, maybe an inch drop, would be a good thing to do, unless you have a steep driveway, in which case you can leave the cars how they are. But I can understand wanting the aesthetic of a lower car because it does look a lot better. So if you look from here, you might be able to see that 1 inch drop actually does change the fitment a lot, and it looks a lot better. Into the interior of the car, we have harnesses, we have a harness bar, we have subwoofers back there, we have the steering wheel, and one of my favorite ones is actually that PA system there. Although I can't use it on the street, but at car meets, it's really fun to use. So here's what I would say about modifying the interior of the car. Again, doesn't help value at all, but if your car does not go on the track, do not get these. They are so uncomfortable to use on the street. A lot of times I don't even want to drive this car. Luckily, I still have the stock seatbelt, so I can just put that on and it's no problem. But as far as harnesses, I do not recommend getting these and running them on the street. But when it comes to subwoofers and other sound things like that you can easily remove, that I highly do recommend, because this can actually be repurposed for the next vehicle that you have. This custom box won't work for any next vehicle that I have, unless it's obviously a Mustang. But you can take these subwoofers and go ahead and put them in a normal box, just a regular square box, and put them in the trunk of a different car. So subwoofers I do recommend, but other pieces like, for example, race inspired pieces like this, where you're actually making the car more oriented toward the track, I do not recommend for the everyday driver. But if you're someone that wants to have a nice aesthetic where you have handles like this, maybe a nice steering wheel just to improve the aesthetic of your car, those are okay. Again, remember, these don't raise the value of your car. So if you're okay with losing the money entirely, then you can go ahead and get those. And for comparison, this is what the stock interior looks like. This is on the convertible car. As you can see, that is the stock steering wheel, which is also still really nice. That is the stock shifter, which if you saw on my car was very, very short. That is okay to drive both on the street and on the track. I've been enjoying my short throw shifter, but this is what the stock shifter looks like. For me, it's a little bit too tall. So the shifter I do recommend for any use. One thing that's a bit too tough on this car though is the clutch spring. We have one of the heavier springs in here just to give it a more linear feel, but I've had the issue where sometimes the spring pops out. Personally, I think you should keep the stock spring. It is much better overall. Not only is it much better on the street, but the last thing you want is for that spring to pop out when you're on the track. So I would keep the stock spring on there. Now there's something to be said about how much a car turns heads. In my car, I get compliments all of the time. Everywhere I go, people stop, look at the car, give me a compliment. Whereas whenever we're driving the stock car, no one stops, no one says anything. It's just regular traffic. Not to say that my full bolt-on car is special, but the reality is not many people notice a completely stock Mustang because they're just very common on the street. Whereas this car, when you see it, you can tell that it looks completely different. So this is why this car gets a lot more attention rather than this car. And now that we're getting to the back of the car, one thing that I don't recommend is having a super loud exhaust system. One issue that I have is the neighbors getting upset, and these Mustangs can get extremely loud. It really doesn't need to be that loud because it's not extremely fast of a car. It's a little bit higher on the horsepower range than your typical car, but it doesn't need to make all of that noise. So personally, I would go with something a little bit more tame on the exhaust if I was redoing it, or just keep the stock exhaust system. The thing is, you can still get decent power with just a tune and not even changing the exhaust much. So as far as exhaust, I would keep it more tame. There are some suspension components that just make sense to get regardless of whether you're going to be driving on the street or driving it on the track. One of those is the BMR lockout system. I actually have those installed in this car right down there, that red piece right there. These Mustangs actually struggle a ton with wheel hop, and that is one of the main things that has helped me so much with daily driving and just having fun, spirited driving in general, not only on the track, but even on the streets. That is one of the big things that make this car a lot more fun to drive than that car. So whether you are tracking your car or whether you are driving it daily, 100%, if you have a Mustang, you should get those BMR lockouts. And when it comes to getting a car wrapped, obviously this car looks incredible and it would be impossible to get this color from the factory. And this was one of the big deal breakers that I had when getting a car, is I actually wanted it to be this color. So I bought this car as a white car and went ahead and got it wrapped. So for me, I think the looks say a lot, but a wrap is expensive. It's about $3,000 and only lasts around 5 years, depending on how much you use the car, right? So when it comes to wraps, I think it depends if you're ready to waste that money, because once you spend the money on that wrap, it does not add value to the car, and in 5 years it's gonna be gone entirely anyway. So if you have extra money to spend, and one of the most important things for you is having a very specific color, then yeah, I would say go ahead and get a wrap. But if not, I would try to find a car that actually has the paint color that you like from the factory, do some research to see which colors they had which years, and try to get it that way. That way you don't have to keep changing something every 5 years, and it costs like $3,000. It's just far too much. And so moving on to the brakes, I do not recommend changing out these rotors. They are plenty good from the factory. And as far as the brake pads, I did go with some more aggressive pads, but obviously it comes at the expense of all this brake dust. You see all that orange coloring on there. These are supposed to be black wheels, but they're all orange colored from that. As you can see, the back ones still have the stock brake pads on it, and those are nice and clean. So if we were to go over to the stock car, obviously stock rotors, because even if you're tracking these cars, I haven't even gotten to the point where I run into the issue of them getting too hot. Obviously, if you're a more advanced driver, you're probably gonna want something that is slotted, but if you're a more advanced driver, you're probably not watching this video. So I would say stick with your stock rotors and stock pads. For the most part, they have been just fine driving around every single day, and they stay quiet and they stay clean, which is the most important part. As you can see, mine always get dirty. So all of that is to say that Ford did a great job coming out with a solid car from the factory. There are very few things that go wrong with this car. Sometimes we have some issues with maybe one of the window motors or other little things, but in general, if you want something that's actually reliable and actually performs well across the board, keep it stock. And most importantly, you don't get any value added to the car by adding all of these modifications. With that being said, I actually am keeping this car for my entire life. I'm never selling this car. And the reason for that is because I actually want all of the modifications to be worth it. If I was to sell this car in a couple years, again, that money completely disappears. But if I keep the car forever, I use the entire life cycle of that modification. For me, that makes it worth it. So if I never sell this car and just keep using it, keep driving it, keep having fun, then I say it's worth it to mod it. But if you're the normal person that is just gonna have a car that you're gonna drive around that you want it to be sporty, go ahead and keep it stock. These things are incredible, really fun cars, and that is the way to keep it reliable and actually bearable to drive every single day. This car on the left, far too bumpy to drive every single day. This car on the right, nice and quiet, still has enough power. You can drop the top. It doesn't make funky noises. This is the way to go if you drive it every day. This is the way to go if you're gonna keep it forever and drive it on the track. That is the verdict. So if you wanna see all of the modifications on this car right here, go ahead and click the next video where I go over all $25,000 worth of mods on this car and talk about everything that they do.